did you learn by seeing just his understanding of the city? Because, I mean, we can't understand him apart from this city.
I think what stands out to me is that for the first half of his life, he didn't have any experience with the things that we would associate with him. Multicultural ministry, urban ministry, city center, global ministry, no experience with it. I mean, he's a guy from middle class, mid-Atlantic Pennsylvania who goes up to Boston at this, American school suburban location, and then goes from there to a small town, rural South, or sort of quasi ex-urban, almost South. And then, I mean, that's the first half of his life. There's no city in there. There's no multicultural ministry. There's cross-cultural for a Yankee going down to, a place where the fathers of some of his church members had fought in the Civil War, and that's cross-cultural in that sense for him. But of course, it's the same language and just no global perspective in there. So I think that was what stood out to me, was that most everything we associate with him just wasn't there.
Well, he goes there, and you see him shaped as a pastor, and you mentioned how over time you see him in like cafes talking to people. He's just listening, he's learning, he's engaging, he's always reading. I mean, he's always reading from the time that he was young. What are, like, you even document a lot of his reading habits. Just as a guess, total guess, how many books does he read a year?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, you'd have to start at 100. I mean, the thing about reading books is that the more you read, as long as you're reading within your genre, the easier it becomes to read. So, and then when you add that, Tim has intellectual gifts that, well, I just speak for myself. Sorry, present company excluded.
Mortals unincluded.
I don't have those. I don't have those gifts. And so, I have an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 1.5-year-old. And I'm just thinking, Tim was reading on his own by 3.
That's crazy.
And you stop and think, oh, well, he must have had parents. No, nothing. They didn't do anything unusual. They had that would have done this. They were a cultured middle class. This is not an upper class family by any stretch. We're talking about middle management, second generation or whatever immigrant. Just this is not a fancy place. They had some opera, but that's your Italian background in there, show tunes, things like that. But reading on his own at 3, man, that's not normal. So I mean, there's just, so I would say it's not so much how many books he's read. It's that he is sitting there now with pancreatic cancer, not knowing how much time he has left, and is still reading.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just what he does. It's not only his hobby, but it's also his kind of distinctive ministry contribution in a lot of ways.
Well, you see that in the book, the development of the reading habits, who he's reading. What struck me though is he read so broadly. You mentioned that he stayed within his lane, but he didn't. He's reading. I mean, he's talking about Charles Taylor. You're getting into Philip Reef. I mean, this
Alistair
is not
McIntyre, Robert Bella. Mm-hmm.
All these guys.
It's a good point. It's a good correction. It's true.
Well, I'm not trying to correct. I'm just trying to understand.
You're right.
I mean, he's not reading about Japanese art. I mean, he could. Yeah. I'm sure he could.
He had Mako Fujimura as one of his elders, so I'm sure he probably did. Read Japanese art. Yeah, you're right. I guess what I was trying to say is that if you're listening or watching this and you're 25 years old, that's overwhelming. You're like, I can't read that quickly. I don't know what to do. And I guess my message is simply to say, yeah, you're right. That's not going to happen. It's kind of like what I said earlier about Russian literature. I wouldn't have just run and grabbed one of those books off the shelf. I needed to have somebody teach me what to look for. I needed to be discipled effectively in what to understand there. And so it's just to say that even when Tim was reading those social critics, which is, forms the last chapter of my book, it's because he had James Davison Hunter, the head of the Institute for the Advanced Studies of Culture at the University of Virginia.
He's coming on the show, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's coming on. We've been corresponding about it. His new book that comes out in the spring of 2024.
Oh, I wonder what he's going to feel like when he ends up on the show.
love it, Collin. He's gonna love it. He's gonna be so excited.
Who booked this?
They're fired. They're so
I gotta have a talk. What's his book coming out in 2024, by the way?
I can't tell you on the air. I don't want to tell you on the air. I don't want to give it
Okay.
away. I'll tell you after the show's over.
Off the air. Sorry for
air.
everybody.
No. It's okay. I just don't want to betray anything that he's shared in case that he doesn't want that to go public. So
okay. Well, I didn't know you were best buds.
Well, that's how I roll, Collin. That's how we roll at Collin. That's how we roll at Apollo Swatter. We're just trying to follow the TJC, catch the wave of TGC right there.
That's funny. That's funny. No, I love it. Well, I mean, he had his help. Mm-hmm. So you can plainly see he was not doing this as a pastor in Hopewell, rural Virginia, with 3 young boys born there in those 9 years. Wasn't reading Charles Taylor back then. He was reading Puritan paperbacks back then. So
or Goodnight Moon. That's what I would be reading.
True.
Goodnight Moon.
that famous author. Yeah. So you're right. That's all I wanted to say was just his reading habits. The one constant would have been Tolkien. Is that he would have been reading him for that whole life. And I think what I say in the book is that he's never stopped reading Tolkien.
Well, always reading parts him. You got me with, and I had to read it, the Eucatastrophe.
Yeah, the Eucatastrophe.
What is that? Like, I read it and I was like, what is he talking about? I don't know what this is.
Well, essentially, it's that moment when all hope seems lost and then finds the resolution in there. So it's basically it's the cross. So what he talks about with Tolkien is that sense. It's Mount Doom. It's the gates of Mordor, if I'm remembering correctly, right? So you're at the gates of Mordor, you're on Mount Doom, and it's that moment when all hope seems lost that light begins to dawn. And so that paradigm of literature is plainly built off the biblical pattern. But if you look at it, it's not just the cross. That pattern is everywhere in Scripture. And I mean, of course, it's Pharaoh's army at the river, and it's God's people. Like, where are we? With their backs to the water, we're all going to drown. And then God makes a way, and then Pharaoh's army drowns. And then, it's that kind of stuff in there that Tolkien was trying to get at. Of just the great literature has that moment where you think all hope is lost. And what he talks about is the incarnation is itself, these 400 years of silence, no prophetic word, but then the incarnation is that dawn of hope. It's literary terminology, but it's helping to explain the biblical pattern that we see.